This is Travis Lee Bailey in front of the Moscow United States Embassy, the United States Embassy of Moscow. And this behind me is the White House that was laid siege by the puppet President Yeltsin in 1993 with the blessing of the West. My phone rang at 7:30 in the morning on the 24th of February. The dialer was my American friend from my high school days in the United States. He was the last person I expected to call, especially at night 7:30 in the morning. I knew immediately the war has actually broken out. The beginning of the war did not surprise me. In fact, it's long overdue. What surprised me was the fact that he knew nothing. This American knew nothing about the suffering that the Russian Ukrainians have endured over the past 8 years. Let me get something straight. NATO promised that they wouldn't move an inch to the east. That was a lie. And now we are surrounded by an aggressive military alliance. NATO gladly bombed Yugoslavia under the pretenses of a potential genocide. Did they bomb just military installations? No. NATO destroyed schools, hospitals, bridges, cultural monuments, private businesses, and industrial plants. Did you forget about that, Americans? Did you forget about how NATO pumped money and weapons into Georgia, bombarded Russian peacekeepers and civilians? Of course you did, because your media doesn't want you to know. Did you forget how yet another territory was ripped away from Serbia? Do you not remember Kosovo? Did you protest then? I bet you didn't, and I bet you didn't even care. Did you forget the invasion of Libya? If you're in Europe, you can't forget thousands of migrants. Are your daily reminder of what your governments did to that country? Did you protest the illegal invasion of Syria by Turkey and the US? I bet you didn't. Do you care about Saudi Arabia starving Yemen? I bet you don't. Do you care, or did you care, about the illegal invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan under false pretenses? What? They aren't people to you? Why haven't you been vocal against the murder of children and civilians at Iraq and Afghanistan weddings by American bombardment? Ah, that's right. They're brown people. They're probably worth less to you. Where were your crocodile tears when Kyiv started bombarding Ukraine? Russians in the east simply for doing the exact same thing as the Ukrainians did in the west? Was it to get rid of the corrupt government? Where was your crocodile tears when Kyiv shut off electricity and water to Crimea? Where was your Save the Ukrainian People when 48 civilian anti-Maidan Ukrainian protesters were rounded into a Union trade house in Odessa and burned alive, whilst those who tried to escape the fiery hell were beaten and shot? I was in Odessa for 2 years, in Odessa, Ukraine. I was on the Trade Center for 2 years, from 2000 to 2002. Do you by any chance know who the Madonna of Garkovka is? Do you know what the Alley of the Angels Memorial is? Let me give you a hint. People engraved into that memorial aren't alive, and they are not adults. Did you shed even one digital virtual signalizing tear when the children at the children's beach in Zagaraza were purposely bombed by the Ukrainian military using illegal cluster bombs? I bet you didn't. But that's okay. How would your mainstream media keep you in the dark for 8 years? The US and its allies have been pumping billions of dollars worth of lethal weapons into Ukraine. For 8 years, the Ukrainians have been waging a war with their own people in the east. And for 7 years, Russia and the people of the Donetsk and Lagos republics have been patient, and the other republic have been patiently waiting for Kyiv to adhere to the Minsk II agreements. Should Russia have waited maybe 20 more years? You know the amount of years that U.S. spent killing Afghanistanis? So whilst leaders like Boris Johnson, Joe Biden, Emmanuel Macron, Olaf Scholz, and Ursula von der Leyen have been virtue signaling about the poor Ukrainians, they have been robbing the Ukrainians of their dignity. making their economy run on loans from the IMF and basically robbing them of their future, and Russia is to blame. When we were their primary trading partner, the West, when we, Russia, were their primary trading partner, the West pushed Russia into a corner to protect ourselves from an increasingly hostile neighbor who wants to become part of a hostile military alliance called NATO and lose Nord Stream 2, the German gas pipeline, for example, or watch Russian Ukrainians get slaughtered by the thousands. The West wanted to fight this war with Russia until the very last Ukrainian. Ukrainians are puppets of the United States. Remember Kosovo, people. Do you remember? Well, the Lugansk and Donetsk republics have every right to exist. Russia didn't set the precedent. Your leaders did. Your American leaders did. And your European leaders did when they recognized Kosovo. Final food for thought. Why was there no bombardment of innocent civilians in Crimea, even though it's closer to Kyiv than Donetsk is? I'll give you a hint. The actual Russian military was there protecting the people. Crimea, which is ethnic Russian, voted overwhelmingly to become part of Russia. So the military was already in Crimea at the time. Here's another. The Ukrainian army has been fighting the invisible Russian army for 8 years, now in the east, according to your mainstream media. Why then did the Ukrainian army collapse within 24 hours when fighting the actual Russian military? What do you think your tax dollars were doing in Ukraine? Your tax dollars were used by Ukrainians in the West to kill Ukrainians in the East, and you don't give a flying. So if you haven't been following this conflict from day one, and now you put the blue and yellow flag on your photo, wipe away your crocodile tears, please, and find out why your governments have been supporting those who made Nazis, fascists, criminals like Stephen Bandera their national war hero. Don't expect a good result from pushing a bear, the Russia and the dragon, China, into a corner, and definitely don't be surprised when the bear and that dragon begin pushing back. The Chinese century started in 2015. Cold War II started by your measures on February 24th, 2022. We see it as starting on 2014 when the coup happened on Maidan, when you helped overthrow the democratically elected the Ukrainian government that was supportive of both Russia and wanted to be neutral. If you've been crying for the collective millions of dead, if you haven't been crying for the collectively millions of dead Iraqis, Afghanistanis, Syrians, Libyans, Yugoslavians, Yemenis, and East Ukrainians these past 20 years, but you're crying crocodile tears for Ukrainian military installations, wipe them away and think about your governments and what they've been doing and what they're still doing. You were willfully ignorant and collectively guilty for the deaths of conservatively 6 million people, most civilians since the end of World War II, the same amount of Jews who died in the Holocaust. Where is your outrage? I hope that this 8-year story of a war started by the criminal Ukrainian government in 2014 against its own people can finally come to an end, and Ukrainians and Russians can finally live in peace. Jeff Young is running in Kentucky in 2022 for the Kentucky Congress. He's running for Congress in 2022 in a red state against a neocon, Andy Barr, an ignorant neocon who is pushing Russia into the corner. Also, Tulsi Gabbard, who ran in 2022. She is probably going to run for president in 2024. Please support her. I also recommend, if you don't understand this conflict and you don't understand the history of the United States, I recommend this book, Addicted to War. Why the U.S. Can't Kick Militarism. It's a comic book. It's a graphic novel. MoscowAmerican.com. WhyDon'tRussiansmile.com. This is Travis Lee Bailey at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, with the White House in the distance. Peace.